like to at least get an idea of if one other topic in React had to be reviewed to help you prepare for your project, what would that be? So I'll give you a moment. Mm-hmm. Okay. How you connect React with Mongo. I think when it comes to React and Mongo, you're not necessarily connecting React with Mongo. You're connecting React with the backend server, right? Because it's the server that has access to Mongo. So you had two separate servers, like with the movie database, with the movie server, you had a backend server, you had a front end server. The backend was the node server that had Mongo, and then you had the front end server that was React. And then you used React routing to route. You would make fetch calls or use fetch, post methods and get methods or delete methods to connect back to the server, and then the server would do the thing, right? If the server got a command that said add a movie, it would add a movie. And we could have easily used Postman to add movies and delete movies, right? Just this tool that allows you to connect and send requests to routes without React being in the way. So all React was going to do was format a fetch request to send requests back to the server.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So there's no magic there. If you can figure out how to connect your routes and take data that comes in through the server and update the database, then that's easy enough. The other thing that might have been was React Router, right? I don't know if anybody's been applying React Router. I don't know if the movie database had React Router or not, the movie app that Ryan built. I don't know if it did. I'd have to go take a look at the code, but React Router may be the other thing that you might have, some gray area of mounting and when to use it. Okay. I'm going to say mounting, Ryan, as it pertains to like mounting a component.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've used it a couple times, but I don't, I guess I don't fully understand when to use it and when not to. I kind of get the idea of it, but
sure,
maybe a little bit of explanation of it.
So I'm just trying to understand the idea of mounting. Give me the context of what it's been used for. Like, just give me because when I do mounting, we mount the React app using React DOM. And then I grab a DOM element and I mount the React app to it. So what context of mounting are we talking about here?
We used it in the movies app. And we did, component did mount, right?
Oh, okay. So you're talking life cycles.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
I guess, yeah. There we go.
Oh, all right. There we go. Because there's component did mount, there's component did update. So there's other life cycle states. So the concept of mounting, and we can kind of emulate that too today, and when you would use mounting for a component. Okay. So try to cover that as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Sweet. So I slacked out the lecture, and this is a lecture I pulled from one of the React part-time classes. One of the React part-time classes, they get further into React, right? It's a 10-week React course. The people that are attending the class are supposed to have like really strong JavaScript. So when they come in, they're able to really like make solid progress. And so they had put this together to do that. And so it's just kind of like a hooks tutorial that they put together. So I'm just using kind of their lecture. Now, to go through hooks, there's lots of, or let me take a step back, right? Let's do this. Let's explain why we would be using hooks. So I'm going to say React hooks, right? Let's go to the React documentation, okay? And what is it about React hooks? Well, let's start with React hooks were released in version 16.8, okay? And I think we're up to like React version 16 point maybe 9, I think we're still in the 16 realm, so we really haven't left the 16 as of yet. And so it was relatively new. It's been around, I'm going to say maybe a year about that, and it's really taken off. Everyone is like React hooks. Anyone who's working with React is, talking about React hooks. Now, when you decide to maybe like implement React hooks, be good to know like what is a React hook, and you can watch videos on it. Dan Abramov is like one of the foremost experts on React. If you watch the video, he'll walk through what a React hook is. I'm just trying to see here what their motivation for React. So their idea of using React hooks came because they needed to solve some problems in React, okay? And they've been writing these, React's been around since 2013, and they've had a lot of use cases for React. I think one of the biggest things was when to reuse stateful logic between components. And creating stateful components when maybe they only needed one little thing, like state, which is a big thing, to make them a stateful component. And so the big deal here is that hooks allow you to reuse stateful logic without changing your component hierarchy, which means I can have functional components that have access to state. That's really what it boils down to. These elements now have access to state, okay? So what we're gonna do is we'll build out a really tiny, simple app. I'm just gonna copy and paste some code also, so we can use this. And then we'll start working with React. So I'm in the, let's see, zoom in here. I'm in the instructor examples folder. That's where I'm going to be working. You can be in the student examples. And let me just clear this out. I'm going to use create React app, and I'm going to create an app called Counter. Okay? I'm going to use Counter as our preface for building off of and creating a hook-based or implementing one of the hooks, okay? Okay. So that's just going to take a moment. All right, so it's done. So I see I have Counter. Change directories into Counter. And I'll npm start so I can start it up. And instructor examples here, I now have Counter. Okay. Okay. go. There's my counter. You see where it started. Did it start on this page? Let me see where it started. Oh, I have a couple of React apps running. So I'm going to make sure it works. Just going to start it up. Once it starts, then I can make some edits. So I have a, bare bones React app here. Nothing really magical happening, right? Just going to minimize that. Okay. So I have my counter app, and what I want to do is I'm going to create the most basic counter app, and then I'll refactor it to use hooks. And so you'll get a real better idea of how hooks are going to be used. So I'm going to just go to my source file. I'm going to create a components folder, right? If you're going to create additional components, they should be organized. And here I'm going to create a new file called counter with an uppercase C, counter.js. Okay. I'm going to paste this code. Now I'm going to Slack out that code so you have it as well. You can code along. You can watch. I'm going to push up all my solutions anyway. And now that I have it, I'm going to import it into app. I'm going to get rid of all this header junk here. Right, that's the default stuff that comes with it. And I will put counter. I'm going to get an error because counter has not been defined, right? I imported something that has not, I'm calling something that has not been imported. So I'm going to import counter from counter. Oh, not counter, components. Components, counter, right? React must be in scope and using components. What am I doing wrong here? Is counter, did I not save counter? So, React must be in scope. Oh, I didn't import React from React, right? That's why.
Joe, if we're creating this React app, what is the app going to actually do so I know what to name it?
Oh, so the app is just going to be a counter. And so all we're going to do is be clicking on a plus and a minus and incrementing a number.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's really all we're going to be doing. Let me see what happened to it. Here's our React app. All right, here we go. Does not contain the for. Okay, so I didn't export it also. Here we go. And I have to export this thing. Here we go. Export default counter. Okay. All right. This is really it. App doesn't do a whole lot. But what it does is it just counts. That's it. Up and down. Right? Click the plus, goes up. Clicks the minus, should go down. And that is because decrement needs to be minus. Okay. So now plus goes up, minus goes down. Then we can go into the negatives or the positives. All right, let me do this. So click on thumbs up of a counter app created. Okay. Putting a thumbs up there. I want to see, I'll give you a few minutes just to kind of catch up. Created this thumbs up. I will knock out the whole counter with the export as well. Okay. So I slacked out the whole counter component, and all you really have to do is create it, import it into app, and then we can get started. Okay. Give everyone, so Dustin's got it going on, and just give it a few more minutes. I don't want to go too fast. All right. In there. Dustin, a day, Quincy, sweet. Let me give another moment or two. The lecture also kind of describes, why hooks are being used as well. Okay, before hooks, state needed to be in a class-based component. And classes come with a lot of boilerplate, right? Constructor, super, this, dot, everything. And so that's a lot more typing, a lot more room for error. Now, functions, on the other hand, or functional components, right? Really simple. They're really basic. They're easy to look at, easy to read. But they couldn't manage their own state. And that's the key right here. Could not manage their own state. They could receive props, but they couldn't contain their own state. And so what React decided, people at React said, hey, you know what? What if we kind of do some refactoring in React and we give functional components the ability to have their own state? And you can have your own state, right? Write cleaner code. Even when you spin up a React app, Create React App has changed from creating a class-based component for app to creating a functional component for app. And that's part of this design. If I was to spin up a Create React App a year ago, it would have been an app, just like we always have, but that app would have been a class component and not a functional component. So that's important. So Create React App has adjusted to this new idea where let's create something as basic as a functional component because there's less overhead, okay? There's less to type. There's less to get lost in. All right, so you still only see 3. Yeah, maybe if you just want to watch, that's cool too. There's gonna be some watching, and then there's definitely gonna be some kind of hands-on as well. So we'll get a little bit of practice as well. So let's do this. Okay. So here's our counter component, right? And it's a class-based component. What's missing up here, though? Can anyone tell me what's missing? And I suppose we didn't even need it if it's missing, right? The app works.
It's instead of state, I'm used to seeing this dot state.
Right? And you're used to seeing this. I'm going to add it to constructor, right?
Yeah.
Super, right? This is what you're used to seeing. So what I want to convey here also is that this construct of writing constructor and super and this dot state has been around forever. And when we learned just classes in ES6, just JavaScript classes, you would write it like this. Because Create React App is using a bundler, it's using Webpack to bundle, we don't necessarily need this, okay? So if I get rid of that, then I also have to get rid of this, the keyword. But this is a much more slimmed down version of a class-based component, right? I don't need anything but state in this context, then that works just fine, right? I think if I wanted something like props, I would have to put something in there. So if I was just like props, say this dot props, if that's gonna error, yep, let me see, nope, works. We even have access if we wanted to props. I don't have anything in props, nothing's being passed down, but we still have access to this keyword if that's what we wanted. So I'm just gonna get rid of that because we're not using that. So having this functional component, having this class-based component, a lot of overhead here. You know, I have state here. I have to include this render method, right? So render method is required for, you know, class component, right? We need that. We need state in this construct. It needs to be added like that. We have our methods. We have to reference things. Need to reference this keyword all the time, right? When we call methods, we have to do this dot increment like this dot increment, this dot decrement, this dot state. There's a lot of like overhead that the user needs to type over and over and over again. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to have to type all that. So React came out with these new type of components, right? Where these functional components could embrace this new concept of state, okay? And so I can take this counter component and whittle it down into something much, much smaller, less lines of code. And this almost looks even more intuitive to read. I think that that's easier to read than this is. This looks like a lot. My eyes have to keep moving from line to line to really grasp what's being done. And this looks like a little cleaner code. And so we're going to refactor ours into this cleaner type code, okay? There's also additional documentation here for use state in the lecture. There's quite a bit more. I'm going to kind of walk you through what we're doing right now during the code along. So let's go here. First off, if we want to use hooks, they're only available in a class-based component. So a lot of the times now, our app will break during the process of converting from one to the other, right? So my app works fine now, right? I can click minus whatever. But in order to start using hooks, I have to refactor this into a class-based component. So into a functional component. So I'm going to do just that. So instead of counter extends React component, I am going to say function counter, right? That's the first step. My app is going to break because I have things inside of it, right? Like the render method. The first message I get is render method is required for a class component. Okay, but you know what? I'm changing this. It's not a class component. It's a functional component. So I'm going to get rid of the render method, right? So let me get rid of one curly brace and another curly brace, right? See what it says. Okay, now I get the second error that state is not defined, increment is not defined, decrement is not defined. Okay, I'll go back here. What it's trying to tell me is that this dot state here, I can't really see it. I get it. And this keyword doesn't work anymore. Okay. So I'm going to get rid of state in this fashion because I cannot use state in that fashion anyway within this component. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this dot set state here and here. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of anywhere where there is a reference to this and or this dot state. So I'm just going to call this count. I'm going to call this increment, and I'm going to call this decrement. Okay? I'm going to go back and just see. All right, decrement is not defined, count is not defined, increment is not defined. Okay, so I'm getting a few things. So I'm going to go back here. The first thing I need to do is these methods that we had written as methods before, we can't write it like that in a functional component. Functional component, I need to kind of define them as, you know, function expressions. And a function expression is a function that is stored in a variable. And it's kind of like what's happening here, but I'm going to add the const keyword. And I'm going to say const. You see how the error just disappeared? There's no error. And I'm going to do the same thing with this, const. The error is gone. Okay? The only issue now is count. And it's like, well, where the hell is count? So for the time being, I'll just get rid of count. Let's see if I get rid of all my errors. Okay? So I'm going to go back here. Now, this thing is here. Doesn't really work, right? I'm just going to make sure I don't get any errors. I just getting, you know, logo is defined but never used. Nothing, nothing. Just not working, right? Just not doing its thing. So now I have, I'll get rid of this. I have a functional component. And now this functional component wants to keep or wants to be able to have access to state. It wants to know and manage its own information, its own data. So in order to give it this functionality to use state, right, we're going to use the new use state hook is how we can provide a functional component access to control its own state. So now we're going to go ahead and create it. Now, when we do this, this is the construct. This is how we write it. So I'm going to create a variable, const, brackets, count, comma, set count is equal to react dot use state, and I'm going to give it a starting value of 0. So let me explain what this is doing. Okay, so in this instance here, count is a variable that is set to a value of 0. That 0 comes from here. See the use state? That 0 is what the value is being set to. This is similar to when we had state. This would be similar to something like this. State is equal to count 0. Okay? It's similar to that construct. In all honesty, this is probably what's happening under the hood. But now what we've done with this hook is we've extrapolated count so that it's its own variable. Anywhere in this code now I can reference count, and count will be set to 0. We can increment and decrement count using a set state method, and that set state method now we've given a name of called set count. Okay? So let me just make a note of that. Set count is our way of updating state. Okay, it replaces this dot set state. Okay, it's replacing that. That's how we update state now. Okay, does anyone know what these brackets are doing in relation to this? Can anyone explain maybe this construct written the way it's written? Is that new? Completely new to everyone? I think everyone's just like, what the hell is going on?
I'm having issues with just creating my React app.
Okay.
So
What's the issue you're having?
it's saying npm error cb parentheses never called. This is an error with npm itself. Please report the error at npm.community.
So, Mesa, did you create a React app? Use create React app?
Yeah.
Huh. And you did it in what? Student examples?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Try deleting the app and try recreating it. Like, I haven't seen that error. Is that something you've come across before?
No, and it's not even creating the app. It's aborting it.
Yeah. I'm curious. Maybe I don't know what's happening, but maybe instead of being in student examples, go into another folder on your machine just to try to spin up a create React app.
Yeah, I left student examples and I tried doing it in the main directory too, and it's the same error.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to.
All right. I had to run a quick npm install to get mine to work.
Yeah, I did that too. Here, what did you do? Npm I-G create React app.
No, I created the app and then afterwards I just typed npm install and it kind of got it going. So.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I've seen this happen. This is like just a rare fluke. Sometimes when you do create React app is supposed to go and download all of the dependencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some flukes. It's happened once or twice. Doesn't really happen often. When I run create React app, but when I do npm start, it's like telling me it's missing something. Almost like a package isn't installed. And so I would do npm install to like tell create React app, go find what you're missing. It downloads what's missing and then it installs it. And that's like one of the quick fixes to get that up and running. So that's what we're saying, like create React app, I'm going to assume is already installed on your machine, Mace. So you wouldn't need to do create React, npm install create React app because it should be on your machine. You've been using it for weeks now.
Yeah.
So try just doing the npm I inside of the package where you're located. The other instance that I have seen is if you create a React app, it creates a folder, right, that contains the app. If you forget to change directories into that folder and you ran npm start at the parent folder that doesn't have the app information, you're going to get some weird error messages also. So,
yeah, I don't know what the issue is. I'll keep researching. I don't want to hold class up.
okay.
But I don't think that's the issue. I don't know what's going on. It's not even creating the React app.
All right. I'll continue with the lecture and because it's 4:11. So let me continue with the lecture and then like when we go to exercise, I can try to help you out, get you up to speed. Okay. I'm going to push up this solution anyway. So I think my question was this: does anyone know what's happening here? Has anyone seen that at all? How about this? Has anyone seen this? Now, I know you have seen this. So if I say let, I'm going to do vars here. So if I do var array here, I'm going to do var array, right? We know what that is. Now, if I say var array 2 is equal to array 1 and the number 5. What's the end result here? Who could tell me the end result?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Correct. Array 2 should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And what do we call this syntax?
Spread operator.
The spread operator. The spread operator spreads something out, right? So we know that we can implement that. Awesome. Spreading something out is one way, right? Now, what if I did this? Var obj is equal to an object, and the object had name Joe, right? And we know obj has this thing called name Joe. Awesome. What if I said var name is equal to obj? How did that happen? What do you think is happening here? This is important, because in the world of what I'm just about to go down, I'm going to say you've seen this type of thing happen before in React. But if you haven't, I'll explain what's happening. This is the REST operator. This is called object destructuring. The one place that I think you might have seen this, once again, I'm just making assumptions here, is in React, you might have done something like this. Import React, comma, component. Has anyone seen that before? I'm not sure. Ryan may or may not have done this before.
This is usually the way we do it.
This way, right here?
Yes.
Okay. So then you've seen that happen. So what's happening here? Can you explain to me what's happening with that?
You're using the component structure from React.
Okay. So what is component? What is that?
An object?
React is the object, and then component is a key of that. And in itself, it may be an object, it may be a class, it may be something else. I'm not really sure what this component is, but I know that React component is something, okay? And that this construct of component is what's being put here or called. So anytime you do these curly braces and you target an object, if that object has a key called component, we then take it out and store it in a variable. This concept right here is object destructuring. So I'll just put here component like that is object destructuring. I'm trying to tie it into something that you've already seen. Maybe you haven't delved into what's going on, but that's object destructuring. We pull something out of the object and we store it into a variable. That's object destructuring. Now, array destructuring is similar to that. So if I go back here and I have this array, say just go array 1 and 2. So if I say var, I don't know, 1, 2 is equal to array. Now we know array only has 1 to 4, right? Let's see what happens. What value is 1? And what value is 2? Well, they kind of represent, or they are, based on the position, right? Position 1, position 2. And that's how I got these values to be stored in here. So the way that we would do it in React for object destructuring to elicit the component key from the React object, we can also elicit values from an array using array destructuring as well. And so when we use array destructuring, we need to do it based on positions because an array only knows the things that it has based on position, versus an object knows the things that it has based on key value pairs, right? This key value pair is something that I can leverage to say, create a variable called name that is equal to object.name. Okay, that syntax right up there would have been identical to this. Var name2 is equal to object.name. These two are the same. Okay. Here I'm saying specifically assign it. This is the old way of doing it. And this is the new way. This is the ES6 way. And so arrays have the same functionality. I can elicit these two values from there, and I can create them. Okay. Now I can also do this too. Var 1, 2, rest is equal to R. And once again, 1 is still 1, 2 is still 2. Does anyone have an idea of what rest would return? The rest of the variables. The rest of the array. Okay? Once again, this is a new concept. This is just ES6. It always has all these new things, and we don't get the chance to use them all that often. But the same type of rest here, this spread operator here that we used here to like spread open the array, has its reverse where it takes the rest of the things and it kind of turns it into an array. Depending on the use cases, one spreads open an array, and in this instance, it takes the remaining elements and creates a new array from them and stores them in a value called rest. Okay? This idea of array destruction is important because that's what we're doing here. So React use state is returning back, or in itself is kind of like an array where I can store something here and call it count, and I can instantiate a new instance of, say, set state, but I call it set count. This is whatever you want to call it. I could call it set count. I could say set count it. Doesn't matter. I have the freedom to call this thing whatever I want. In the end, these will be variables that I will use for myself within this particular component. They are not dependent on any naming convention, but they are dependent on position. And the values that they hold will be derived from this thing. This thing returns back a thing, and we can use that. Okay? We could have wrote it like this too. So just another way of maybe writing this. So maybe it's a little bit more intuitive. We could have done this. I could have said const count state is equal to react dot use state, and then said const count is equal to count state 0. Grab the 0 thing because this would return an array, and I could say const set count is equal to count state, once again, or whatever I want, or set count. Here's count state, set count. I'm changing the names, but set count here is this, count is this, and so this is another way of doing it. Okay? What that really tells me is that count state is an array of things. An array of things that I can elicit values from. And we can also, console log and say this is count state. And in our app, let me see if I refresh this. Oops, it's not allowing me to see count state. Oh, it's not user state. It's use state. That's right. Okay, let me refresh it. Here we go. 2 things, right? The first is the value that I stored. I gave it a value of 0, so it puts the value in there. And the second one is a function. And this function becomes our new set state. Okay? So whatever inside this function will allow us to update the state of this variable anytime we call it. Okay? So this is the long way of doing it. Once again, I'm going to go to the more terse way of doing it because you're going to see it written like this kind of more often because it's just shorthand, right? Doing this requires, writing 3 separate variables. Doing it like this, 1 separate variable, just one. All right. So now I have what would equate to be this. This count is really emulating this kind of functionality, and set count is really our new way of setting state. Okay, well, that being said, in here, increment, I need to update state. The old way we did it was this dot set state, right? And then we could say, count, I don't know, this dot state dot count plus 1, right? Plus equals 1, something like that. We didn't do this anyway because we're mutating state. It's a bad example to do. This breaks our code because we can't reference state this anyway. Even if I got rid of this, there is no set state method here. Like our component's just like, what the hell's going on? This is not within the scope of what I understand. So I get rid of this. And I'm like, okay, I want to use this new set count method that I created that encompasses like a mini version of set state. A mini version of set state that targets just this count variable. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say set count plus 1. Okay? I'm going to go down to line 29 here and put the variable count in there so I can see the value, right? I had removed it earlier because I wanted to get rid of any error messages. Now I'm going to go take a look at the app. Let me go take a look at the app. See, 0's back, and if I increment, look, it goes up. If I decrement, it goes nowhere, right? Because the decrement method has nothing inside of it. So in decrement, I would say, hey, set count minus 1. I go back to the app, go up, go down. Everything seems to work flawlessly, okay? And so what this is allowing us to do is this hook, this one hook, this use state hook, because that's the hook. Use state is the hook, okay? And what it allows us to do is emulate state within a functional component. It allows us to create a value, in our instance, count, that we can keep track of and update whenever we need. What happens when you update state? Updating state triggers what? What does it trigger? Triggers
a re-render.
Yeah. So it triggers a re-render, right? So this component's like, hey, this value changed. We have to update that value. Even though we don't have a render method anymore, right? Triggers a re-render, but we don't have a render method. Now I could possibly say that updating state triggers a return of the HTML because I don't have a render method anymore. So making that statement before, like, triggers a re-render, and re-render was kind of like the render method, it's returning back this HTML, okay? And so now this construct here is how I can update my state, and I can create things here to update state with. Does it seem like an easier way to like keep track of state? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right? It's a terser way of doing it. In all honesty, depending on the curriculum we have, because the curriculum is still really based on functional components and class-based components. React 16.8, when it came out, we can't just jump on the bandwagon because when you go for an interview, I went for an interview probably in March for a React position. I went for a few interviews. I had just taken a break. And on one of the interviews, they gave me a React component, a class-based component, and they asked me to walk through the whole thing. Explain to me what's being imported here. What's these curly braces mean? What is constructor doing? What is super doing? How do you reference this? What is this dot state doing? I had to go through every single line of code and explain what it was doing. So you will be expected to do that. Hooks are new. They're not going to expect that you like know hooks or master hooks, but they will expect on an interview that you know what a basic functional component is and what a state-based or class-based component is and all of the little nuances inside of it. They're going to ask you, how do you bind the context of this to a class component? You're going to see some things. So you have to know how to do that. Now, that being said, this is kind of the newer way of implementing React components. And the React site itself is saying, do not refactor your previous components. If you decide to implement React hooks, start writing your new components using React hooks. But they do not suggest you go back and like rewrite your code. Leave your code the way it is. But if you approach it now, do it like this, okay? Now, what if we had multiple values that we wanted to update, right? There's just count. Here we keeping track of count. What if I had an input field here and I wanted to capture the user when they type, just like normal inputs, right? Well, let me put an input. Let's see. If I do an input here, let me just see. If I do an input, if I say, you know, placeholder is equal to type something, all right? I just want to make sure that that works. My component broken? Here we go. Type something, right? This counter still works. I can type whatever I want. Awesome. Nothing like fancy magical is happening here. But now I have to keep track of what the user types, right? In previous examples, we added a value here that was equal to something in this dot state dot value. Like that's how we did it before. We also had a component here called, you know, like an on method called onChange. And onChange was equal to something like, I don't know, this dot handle change, right? This looks familiar. We did something like this. Okay, I'm just going to move stuff to the next lines. Now, we know we can't do this, and we know we don't have this dot state dot value, so this construct just won't work, right? All right. Well, first, let me just fix it so I can kind of stop this thing from breaking here. I will just create a new method called const handle change, right? That's going to be equal to, I'm going to grab the event, and we'll do something later on. So I'll get rid of this because we know this doesn't work inside of this. And then this dot state dot value here for right now, you know, maybe I'll just type more text or something like that. I just want to get this thing to work. Let me see. Does it work? More text, right? User could type whatever they want, but they can't really because I'm typing and because the value is kind of hard-coded, you won't capture the user text, right? All right. Let's say that this count wanted to keep track of multiple things, okay? Multiple values in state. Because as of right now, state kind of looks like this. But say I want state to look like this. I want state to have a count of 0, and I want it to have an input value of an empty string right now. I want it to have more than one value. There's two ways to approach this, okay? Here's like the magic of useState. It's kind of cool. I can do one of two ways. So I'm going to do it this second way to break it down so you can see how state now can be broken off into its own things. Const value set value is equal to react.use state empty string. It's the same writing as here. It's the same syntax. And this, I'm just saying set it to an empty string, right? Now, instead of saying more text here, I'm going to set this to be value. Because now I have a value variable that I can use, right? I'm going to go take a look here. I'm going to refresh. Everything seems to work. I can type in stuff, but nothing's being updated. It's set to value. Value is an empty string. I need to do something else. What do I need to do? Well, every time the user types something in, right, I need to set value, right? And value will be equal to e.target.value, right? That's what it should be, okay? So let me take a look. Refresh this. Oh, not e.target. It is, I think it's an object here. Give me 1 second. It is this. That's it. Set out value, set value, value. No, I think it's, maybe it's that. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Look. Now it's like putting everything that I typed in there is now being put in there. Okay? So let me fix that. Tutorial. Just trying to get the right syntax right. Counter. It is. Oh, yeah, here it is. That's why. It's really easy enough. Once you see it, you're going to be like, oh, that makes sense. Set value. We'll set this value just like that. Let me do this. Let me refresh. Refresh it. I think I might have broke the app. Let me see. Nope. I'm going to stop my server because something weird is happening. Stop the server. Oh, this server. Stop it. Restart it. I don't know what's happening here. It's not refreshing. It's kind of getting stuck. All right. Not good to do this. Let me do this one more time. Okay. So let me see. Here we go. Type something. Sweet. So here, instead of me taking counts and incrementing it and decrementing count, right? Under the hood, it knows that the value that you're targeting is this value. And so now it will automatically update that value. Whatever this turns into, so count plus 1 is a value, and then that value is then used to set count to this new number, this new value. Same thing with this, okay? All we have to do is pass in the event, and boom, we're able to grab it. And so we are able to do it with 2 separate methods, okay? One of them is responsible for updating count, and one of them is responsible for updating value. If either one of these counts or values are updated, then this gets re-rendered, okay? It's really, once again, it's not that difficult to do the conversion. And if you follow the proper syntax and you make these small little changes, you should be able to make those adjustments, okay? Let's see. All right, so I want at least a little bit of hands-on for everyone. Okay? So let me do this. Nope. Get rid of that. All right. Slack 16.9. All right. I'm going to select this CodePen app. It's already been factored. I don't have it as a create React app. What I want you to do is this. Open up the CodePen. Fork it first, too. Make sure you fork it, because forking it will give you a copy of it. Otherwise, you're working under my thing and you can't save it. What I want you to do is this. The form, everything works. I can click on here and type in the color red. It adds the color red. I can click on red, and it changes colors. It does anything that I need. It just doesn't delete them, but I can add, blue, and it'll add the color blue. Changes the background. We're not concerned with that. What you're concerned with is this. On line 61, we have a form that extends components, right? This is a class-based component. We can see that it has state, super, constructor. It has a handle submit, a handle change, a render method, right? What I want you to do is convert that into a React hook that uses a functional component that uses React use state hook, okay? I state that here. We factor the form into a functional component that uses the use state hook to manage state. How would you approach doing this? Who wants to just kind of walk me through the steps of doing this? What's a methodical way of doing this? Nobody? What's kind of like I'm not saying error-prone way of doing it, but I taught this just the other day. And what I had students do is they try to tackle everything at once. Things are breaking, and they don't even know where the errors are happening because they barely understand what use state is. If I had to just reproduce this form, what would be the easiest way to do that? What do you think? So I want to get you started at the most basic level, and then you can take the additional things and do what you need to do with them, okay? How about this? How about I call this form 1 just so that it doesn't interfere with my other form, right? Okay. I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'm going to create a functional component called form. And form is going to return something, right? What is it going to return? It's going to return this form. So I'm just going to copy everything that, I'm going to actually copy the whole return thing. Watch this. Copy all the return and put it inside of this form. Now I'm just going to get rid of these methods because they're going to trip up everything. I'm going to get rid of placeholder. Maybe I don't even need the placeholder. I don't need on change. At this point in time, I don't really even need value, right? Is it working? Is the form there? Yeah, right? I see this form. It doesn't do anything. You could type, well, you can type, but it's not capturing anything. But you see how you have a starting point now? You can slowly extend this form component to be a component that leverages hooks without having to manhandle this form and do everything and chop it up all at once. Because that's just going to take you time to do, okay? So this is our backup, right? Form 1 is our backup because now I'm outputting form as the element, right? So this is the component that I'm actually outputting. Changes made to this will be seen on the screen. But you have this. You can piecemeal this thing together. Create state, right? I would do something here. use React, use state hook, right? Create the supporting methods, right? What are those methods? Those methods are going to be handle submit, handle change, right? Supporting methods. Those methods are handle submit, handle change, okay? And then you'll have to update state. And so inside those methods, you update. This is, all you're doing is refactoring a form component, something you've probably created, I don't know, 5 or 6 times already, right? To capture data. You did it with the to-do list. You did it with the movie app. It's the same thing. And you're just refactoring it into a functional component that imports use state hook. Okay? That's all you're doing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you about, you know, it's 4:43, so I'm going to give about maybe 10 plus minutes to kind of work on it. I'll go through the solution then with you. But I really just want you to get a little bit of hands-on to just kind of confirm, did you really grasp what it was? And I'm going to push up what I've done as well. So git add, git commit, counter, git push. I'm pushing it up. You can look at the code. The code that I was working on is this. And this is really it. I'll also do this. I'll take this code and I'll Slack it out. So you'll have it as well. Why it keeps doing this. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to give you, once again, about 10 minutes. Then we'll wrap up. It'll only take like 5 minutes to do the real refactor. Okay. So timer. Give you about 10 minutes to try it on your own. Okay. I won't go into any breakout rooms. It's only 10 minutes. So just stay in this one room. I'm just going to go get a glass of water. I'll be right back.